Hello! Today I want to talk about one of my favorite characters introduced in Shadow of the Erdtree, that being Romina, Saint of the Bud. Found in the ruins of Rauh, you should know that I am a complete sucker for ancient ruins, and the ruins of Rauh have so many secrets and illusions to uncover, so you can expect at least one more video centering on this dead, enigmatic culture. Thank you very much to all of you who are watching my videos about Godfrey and Ymir. It's been a blast watching the channel grow and having conversations with some very thoughtful people in the comments. But without further ado, let's get to our topic. Romina, Saint of the Bud, is one of only 3 mandatory bosses found in Shadow of the Erdtree, and we find her in a small church deep within the Rauh ruins. The ruins leading to the church and the church itself have been completely overrun with scarlet rot, the bane of many players' existence, and Romina herself has taken on the most badass, if not reviling form. Her lower body comprises a centipede in front and a scorpion to the rear, and at the nexus of the two, her human form spirals out of the chitinous mass, sporting insectoid wings, and her hair is in the shape of an enclosed flower bud. She wields the pole blade of the bud, which is described as Weapon of Romina, Saint of the Bud. A scarlet glaive with a dangling bud-like blade. Attacks cause buildup of rot. Once, in the crumbling, burning church, Romina held the bud in speechless silence. That bud would become her blade. As many have pointed out by this point, we can see this scene being depicted in the Shadow of the Erdtree story trailer. She has adopted the Aeonian butterflies that are as of the rot goddess's wings, yet the butterflies are a distinct purple-pink color. Indeed, it is apparent that she has control over rot in general, yet has manifested her own version of it. She guards the Church of the Bud from all intruders, and just behind the church is the Sealing Tree, a Golden Order creation used to blanket the Tower of Ynir in shadow and impenetrable thorns. When we defeat her, we of course gain a remembrance that is hewn into the Shadow Tree. It tells us that, after the church was burned to the ground, Romina discovered a twisted divine element, which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot. Perhaps then, the buds might find somewhere to gain purchase once more, within the scorched remains. So, with that overview out of the way, we can discuss some more theoretical aspects of her character. Let's begin by looking at the place we find her, the Church of the Bud. When compared to the architecture of the Rauh ruins, it's very distinct. However, it completely matches the architecture we find in Belurat and other Hornsent settlements. Therefore, we can deduce that the church is a much later Hornsent addition to the area. The bud for which she is named is quite interesting. A short definition of a botanical bud provided by Oxford Dictionary is a compact growth on a plant that develops into a leaf, flower, or shoot. It should be noted that in Elden Ring, a bud can also describe the beginning stages of nearly any outgrowth, plant or animal, as the term is used to describe Millicent and her sisters, as well as various horns found on animals that are touched by the crucible. However, given the botanical imagery represented by the scarlet rot and throughout Elden Ring, I believe the first definition finds more purchase in this context. The pole blade of the bud is described as being this bud itself, and Romina wields it as her blade. It was not always infused with scarlet rot, as she weaved the twisted divine element into scarlet rot to allow the bud to gain purchase once more within the scorched remains. So in order to save the bud, she manifested the scarlet rot. This is further evidenced by the item Scarlet Bud, in which it is stated that it's a large rotten bud that will never come into bloom, material used for crafting items, grows in lands blighted by the scarlet rot. There was a time when these buds were not touched by the scarlet rot's blight, when they were the symbol of a small church deep in the ancient ruins of Rauh. The ash of war of the pole blade of the bud is called Romina's purification, and it is described that this was once a sacred act of purification. This must be describing its use before the church was burned in the Crusade, because after this event, Romina is the only survivor. There is no one left to purify. The fact that this sacred act is the slash of a blade implies that this is purification through death, and death is something that the Hornsent as well as the ancient Rauhans were quite familiar with. This also implies that Romina was the Saint of the Bud for a long period of time before she took on the Scarlet Rot, in that she was an important enough figure to perform the sacred act, so much so that the technique is named after her. Let's take a step back and look at the ruins surrounding the Church of the Bud. Based on the items that we find or items we can craft deriving from these items, it becomes clear that the Rauh civilization was heavily invested in the manipulation of spirit, light, the crucible, and even death. One item that exemplifies all of these aspects is the Sprite Stone, derived from a Burrow Stone, Beast Horn, and Spirit Calculus. The Sprite Stone is described as a Rauh burrow inhabited by a sprite. Craftable item. Uses FP to release a sprite that slowly homes in on enemies. After a short time, the sprite fades away into glittering lights, causing a spiritual explosion on its passing. According to the records left by Hornsent scholars, there were also contrivances known as bond stones that could manipulate the moment the sprite vanishes. The aforementioned bondstone is another artifact that we can find, and it can be used to consume the sprite dwelling within the Sprite Stone, effectively killing it and releasing an explosion of spiritual white light. Another artifact that has ties to the Rauh culture is the stone-sheathed sword. It is a relic of a lost civilization from time long past, said to have served a ritual purpose at altars of light and darkness. And it can take on the form of either the Sword of Darkness or the Sword of Light. Similar to the Pole Blade of the Bud and its sacred act of purification, it is a ritual weapon that inflicts damage, so this ritual likely involves the death of the sacrifice. Two of the stone sword altars are found in ruins relating to Rauh, those being the Rauh ruins themselves and the ruins of Unti. What an altar is doing in the Fog Rift catacombs is beyond me at the moment, so let me know your theory in the comments. But I think we can safely tie this sword to the culture of Rauh itself. This will all be relevant to Romina in a moment, but let's examine possibly one of the most defining features of the Rauh ruins, the giant statues of what I call the patron saint of Rauh. Affectionately called Elden Jane or Elden Joan, in reference to the Elden John statues we find in the ancient dynasty ruins. These all portray the same figure, a woman wearing a flat-topped regal headdress. There are the giant statues of these women as well as reliefs portraying three women who strangely wear headdresses that bear resemblance to the Nox swordstress. And we can find shadowed Hornsent praying to them, as well as Rauh burrows close to them in many cases. There is one particular Elden Jones statue that is of particular interest. Just before the invisible bridge leading to the Rauh ruins stone sword altar, we find an Elden Jane statue being worshipped by Kindred of Rot. The incantations Pest Threads and Pest Thread Spears both describe the Kindred of Rot as abandoned children of the Rot goddess and abandoned servants who found a mother in the Saint of the Bud, respectively. So what would they be doing praying to Elden Jane when the civilization of Rauh has no ties to the Scarlet Rot, aside from Romina's residence there? You may see where I'm going with this already, so I'll just state my theory outright. Elden Jane is portraying a Saint of the Bud, and Romina is the deity of the Rauh culture. The Hornsent discovered her when they were exploring the ruins, and built the Church of the Bud for her as they incorporated her into their beliefs. The Kindred of Rot are described as having a keen intellect according to the description of their weapon, and they recognize their new mother, Romina, in the ancient statues of the Rauh patron saint. This is backed up by the verdigris discus being found at the foot of one of these Elden Jane statues. In-game, verdigris is described as the gift of an outer god, and in real life, verdigris is a green patina that naturally forms on bronze and copper as it oxidizes, in the same process of how rust forms when iron oxidizes. Taking this information and combining it with the fact that our friend Moore wears the verdigris armor, who in turn is a part of the collection of kindred of rot known as the Forager Brood, this outer god can be none other than the outer god of rot. The practice of people returning what was given to them by a god is fairly prominent in many cultures across the world, as well as pagan religion groups such as Wicca, so I think that the reasoning for this being left here is quite sound. It was left as an offering by the kindred of rot after being adopted by Romina. And on the subject of adoption, she also adopted the Aeonian butterflies, abandoned aspects of the rot goddess herself according to the rotten butterflies incantation. There's an additional piece of evidence related to this that I want to bring up, but don't really take to heart, because it is cut content. And depending on how it's interpreted, it doesn't make much sense in the context of the game. I'll play it now.
Children of the tower, butterflies take wing.
This is highly ambiguous. Is she calling the butterflies children of the tower? That makes little sense in context with the game, for while there is an old Japanese legend about butterflies relating to souls, there is no butterfly imagery in any other aspect of the Hornsent culture, and the butterflies are explicitly referenced as being of the rot goddess's wings. However, this dialogue obviously made it far enough through development to receive a recorded voice line, so by the time this was recorded, they probably had already established the motifs that would make up the Hornsent architecture. Obviously, this is speculation. Perhaps in this dialogue, she is referring to the Hornsent and the butterflies separately, the Hornsent being the children of the tower. Needle Knight Leda refers to the Hornsent as the people of the tower, so in this context, that could work. Given this, I'm interpreting the cut dialogue as Romina calling upon the Hornsent and the butterflies to rise up against us, as presumably the dialogue would happen when we fight her. All of this was leading up to a point, that if she is referring to the Hornsent as the children of the tower, this would create a distinct delineation between herself and the Hornsent, and solidify the argument that she is not one of them. And also that she is a high enough status to refer to them as children. But again, this is cut content and shouldn't be treated as canon. It is interesting though, huh? The kanji used for saint is seijo, which translates literally to holy woman. This is also used for Saint Trina, by the way. It can refer to a divine woman, a religious figure, or just a good woman, such as Mother Teresa before 2016, at least. But anyways, this could bolster the matriarchal link between Elden Jane and the Saint of the Bud. But if you are not convinced yet, let's go back to the story trailer. In the short scene of Romina holding the bud in the burning church, pay attention to what she is wearing, specifically what she wears on her head. She has no horns, and the shape of her headdress is remarkably similar to that of Elden Jane, if not outright the same. On this note, why was she even allowed to survive? She is not hiding, but wide out in the open. Well, Mesmer's forces made concerted efforts to not harm the ruins of Rauh. Specifically, Fire Knight Hilde advocated for this, and if they recognized that she is the patron saint of Rauh, it follows that they would have spared her, while still destroying the Hornsent people and the house of worship. If true, this has implications for the bud as well. Before it was infused with rot, perhaps it held powers that Rauh would venerate, those being the power of the crucible, spirit, and light. I speculate that this white spirit magic we see from the Sprite Stone explosion was what the pole blade of the bud would become infused with when performing its sacred act of purification. Well, what would one of my videos be if there wasn't a heavy dose of speculation involved? Well, why not have some more? What if Romina, and by extension Elden Jane, was a shaman? To lay the groundwork, we know that the Hornsent derive much of their beliefs and culture from studying the ruins of Rauh. We also know that the shaman have a clear connection to plants, evidence being America's grandmother found within the tree at Shaman Village, their ability to meld, aka graft, harmoniously with others, and America's own ability to spawn Erd trees. Tarnished Archaeologist even suggests that during the Age of Plenty, people would literally born from the seed pods of the Erd tree, a practice initiated by America, and so could be linked to the shamans as well, if indeed that is the case. I know that some popular theories are that the shaman or Newman arrived from outer space, or more recently that they arrived on the giant stone coffins we find all throughout the southern shores of the Realm of Shadow. These might be the case, but I want to ponder something real quick. In Belurat and Inir Elim, we find many of these golden crescent-shaped lamps, and upon inspection we see that they detail a boat full of people transporting a bud or sapling. Could this be a reference to the arrival of the Rauhans bringing the bud of Romina to the lands between? Furthermore, the flowers of Shaman Village are quite distinct. There are several types of flowers here, but most prominent are the tall white ones that blossom into clumps, reminiscent of carrot or garlic chive blossoms. These specific white flowers, from what I could find, are unique to two places, the Shaman Village and in front of this one specific statue of Elden Jane. This might be a stretch and a simple case of asset reuse, but the fact that I cannot find these flowers anywhere else in the Realm of Shadow tells me that this is a deliberate placement. Now, there aren't the other colored flowers that we do see in the Shaman Village here, and possibly I may have missed some of these specific white flowers in other places. So this is your call to adventure, to scour the lands between and the Realm of Shadow to prove this evidence inert. And before you go running off, I am aware that there are flowers in the ruins of Unti as well as the painting in Midra's Manse. However, these taller, clumping white flowers that we find at the Shaman Village and in front of this statue don't exist in either of those either. But if all of the above is true, then perhaps the shamans arrived by boat, carrying the bud for which Romina is the saint of, founded the civilization of Rauh, and after this civilization fell, for some unknown reason, relocated to the humble Shaman Village. It could also explain the reliefs of the three women we see in Rauh who wear Nox-looking headdresses, the Nox being reportedly related to the Newman. Additionally, this would solidify America's link to the Golden Crucible, the primordial form of the Erd tree. So that was a whole lot, and I didn't even get into thematic analysis of Romina's character, what this twisted divine element was, or analysis of her soundtrack, which is absolutely fire and probably my favorite from the DLC. But to summarize, Romina is a hero. She is possibly a shaman, the deity of the Rauh culture, and a venerated saint of the Hornsents. When everything was taken away from her by the Crusades, she rose above it all and created a new life in which to carry on her legacy. She even adopted the abandoned children of an absentee maternal figure, as well as the spurned fragments of the rock goddess herself, and began to create a new place of refuge for them. She really is one of the only good maternal figures found throughout the entire lands between. It's possible that she may have lived in this state forever, a better analog for her new outer god than millennia could ever be. Rot is a necessary component to the circle of life when the world is in its natural state. And after all, life sprouts from death as it does from birth. Such is the way of the living. Until the Tarnished comes along and murders her, of course. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, I'd greatly appreciate a thumbs up and even a subscription. And thank you to Last Protagonist for reviewing the script and providing some much needed input, as well as some other members of his awesome community for keeping me linguistically consistent. I want to hear what you think in the comments. Do you think that Romina was part of the Rauh culture and that she could have been a shaman? I look forward to hearing your input, and until next time, grace be upon you, Tarnished.